Hi, Cara.
Hi, Vanessa. I'm excited about today's episode because it's about a very 30,000-foot topic that I think a lot about and you think a lot about, but I'm not sure everyone thinks a lot about because of its generality. And it is what we call the four pillars of health. So
So
there's that.
we think a lot about it, partially because in our health and sex ed curriculum that we wrote for middle school and that we're currently writing for high school, it's a big part of educating kids about taking care of themselves. And as we've often talked about, adults frequently forget that there are all sorts of stepping stones to helping kids learn how to take good care of themselves. And we sort of skip to the end, assuming they know things like, oh, well, you should use soap in the shower, for example. But there's all sorts of other stuff about exercise and eating and sleep and all of the really fundamental ways that people take good care of their bodies and their minds, and how those basic things actually impact all sorts of other parts of our lives, like mood, like relationships, like socializing, like all of those things. So, this is a really foundational episode. Some of it may seem obvious to you, but just know the reason we're covering it is because we want to make sure those are conversations you're having with the kids in your lives.
And we call them the four pillars because it's like there's this roof of health and wellness, and the roof has to be held up by something. And that something isn't just one thing. There are literally different pillars that hold up the roof at each corner. And so the four pillars that we teach, and a lot of other health educators teach, are hygiene, sleep, nutrition, and exercise. And together, think of them as being at the four corners of a house. They can keep everything standing. And without one of the pillars, the roof comes crashing down, right? And when kids understand that, honestly, when adults understand that too, it's a game changer because sometimes we will take care of one or two or three elements really well, but we let the fourth one go thinking, oh, it's fine because like I do the other things. But if you imagine it like a roof being held up by pillars, then you can begin to understand why not honoring what your body and brain need in one of the verticals makes a big difference. So let's start at the top. This is an episode that walks through the how to in the most meta way, how to achieve each of the four pillars of health at any age. Where do you want to start, Vanessa?
Let's start with hygiene because hygiene represents the ways in which achieving health and working towards health actually evolves over time because our bodies evolve over time, our lifestyles evolve over time. And so you may have gotten things together with your, second grader, and you may feel really great about the products you're using and the schedule your kid is on and the way you've talked to them thus far about brushing their teeth or washing their hands. And then all of a sudden you've got a fourth or fifth grader and things get thrown up in the air because all of a sudden they have body odor and foot stink and braces and oilier hair. And all of a sudden the conversations have to sound really different. And the kid starts carrying a lot more responsibility. And so part of understanding health is a combination of teaching kids the science of why it matters, because if kids understand why something matters, they are much more likely to do it. And B, it involves helping kids develop the executive functioning skills to get themselves to the place where they can accomplish these things independently. And it's not forever and ever a battle between you and the kid in your life. So with hygiene, part of it is explaining to a kid how their body is changing, that it's normal, that their hair is oilier and may need a different shampoo, that they may have pimples because their pores are clogged from the protein-rich thicker sweat that their bodies are producing, that thicker protein-rich sweat is being eaten by the natural bacteria on their skin, causing body odor and foot odor. And therefore, we need to use soap. Let's choose some soap. We need to use deodorant, right? Like, this is not rocket science, but it is something that has to be done in a straightforward, science-based, respectful way.
The word hygiene, Vanessa, it's a word that people don't love using. It feels very clinical. It feels very heavy. I mean, there's the Department of Sanitation and Hygiene. It just doesn't feel like the kind of thing you want to talk about. But hygiene, when you boil it down to just its base definition, it's the behaviors or practices that a person engages in. To some sites or some dictionaries say to keep yourself clean. Others say to preserve health. Others say general cleanliness, like environmental cleanliness. They go a little bit broader. When we get to sleep, we're going to talk about sleep hygiene, which is more the ritualistic way into sleep health. So this concept, this pillar of hygiene, really what it is and what you're describing are all the behaviors that lend themselves to cleanliness. And those behaviors have to shift as the body shifts. And news flash, the body changes throughout our entire life. So some of us who have had certain rituals our whole life, and we've washed our face with certain products, or we've used certain, like for me, as my hair has grayed, the texture of my hair has changed entirely. The types of products that worked before for me don't work anymore. I have had to shift my hygiene rituals around hair care as my hair has changed. So some of this stuff applies to kids. A lot of it applies to all of us. So let's get into some nitty gritty. How can we help adults navigate hygiene with kids when the word is icky, the concept is annoying, and they really don't think they smell, or they don't think it's a problem that they're greasy and oily, and we don't want to rock their self-esteem? Vanessa, walk us through a little how-to on the hygiene front.
Well, I mean, in general, you're not going to go up to your 12-year-old and be like, let's discuss the 4 pillars of health. First
Except
pillar,
if you're me.
except if you're living in Carr's house. But like, you're not like, the first pillar is hygiene. The word hygiene comes from the Latin root. Like, you're going to get into specific day-to-day situations, and those are your entry points, right? Your entry point is, hey, it's so hot here in New York and you are sweating more anyways, and your body's changing, so you're sweating even more. How do you think we have to shift your skincare routine so that you don't get pimples and you can clear your skin and slough off the dirty skin cells, the dead skin cells? And so, like, using different situations, or, it's 95 degrees at camp. You're definitely going to get BO. We all get BO when it's super hot. Let's pick out some deodorant so that it feels good on your skin, and also you're less likely to get body odor, right? So we're going meta in this conversation, but when you address any of these things with a kid, you want to take scenarios, situations, and you want to raise the issue and then elicit from them how they think they want to handle it.
Now, there are a lot of evergreen hygiene topics. So hand washing. Hand washing is independent of how hot or cold it is outside or whatever you've been doing. Getting into good hand washing routines, starting when kids are young, is really important in terms of transmission of infections like bacteria and viruses. We all learned that and then some during COVID. But implementing regular hand washing before every meal makes a big difference. And just teaching kids and reminding adults of basic hand hygiene is really important for public health. Where your fingers end up on your face is another hygiene basic. So fingers in the eyes, fingers up the nose, fingers in the mouth. Whether someone is a nail biter, a cuticle biter, a thumb sucker, when your hands are out in the world doing whatever they're doing, touching whatever they're touching, and then they go into your eyes, up your nose, or in your mouth, that is a direct entry point for germs. So there's a lot to be said on the hygiene front about helping kids get out of habits where they're constantly shoving their fingers up their nose. For instance, not an easy one. This one is actually hard.
We learned recently recording an episode with Nina Shapiro, which will come out later this year. And I was like, well, I mean, obviously you tell kids it's like unhealthy to eat your boogers. And she was like, actually, it's not. It's just gross, but it's not unhealthy. So at dinner that night, after we recorded with Nina, I was like, okay, guys, I learned something new today. It's actually like not unhealthy to eat your boogers. And they were all like dying laughing. They were like, what are you going to talk to us about now that you can't just tell us it's like gross to eat your boogers? It is gross. It's just not unhealthy. So have a sense of humor about it. Like, this is not all deadly serious. I mean, I still say to my kids every time they come out of the bathroom, you washed your hands, right? And they're like, yes, mom. Occasionally, they then go back into the bathroom to wash their hands. But joke around about it. It's not so serious. The issue that hygiene feels like it carries a lot of weight for people is that we can all remember either being made fun of by someone else or making fun of someone else because they smelled or they had acne or they were dirty or whatever it was.
Or they had horrible breath.
Or they had horrible
hygiene.
breath. I got better about brushing my teeth in middle school because the boy I liked said to me, did you brush your teeth this morning? Because your breath really stinks. And then,
Vanessa,
of course, I never forgot to brush my teeth.
Okay. If our listeners take no other tip from this episode, let them take that one. A message delivered by you, sometimes helpful, sometimes not. A message delivered by another kid, almost always incredibly loud and clear. Not always kind, but incredibly loud and clear.
Yeah. And if you are in a house where you have more than one kid there, often the older kids will say something to a younger kid. Again, not always kind, but often effective to get that kid to a place of better hygiene. And if you have tried over and over and over again to get a kid to brush their teeth or use deodorant or wash their face, and you're not having a lot of impact, and you think maybe you have another path through, ask that older kid to say, hey, can you have a conversation? Because I'm not making any progress here.
Oh, it's a great way to manage this. An older sibling, a cousin who's a little bit older, but proximate in age, anyone who has that kind of cool vibe about them for your kid, which, sorry, you and I don't. And any trusted adult who's listening, chances are you don't either. But someone who is resonant, that's the person. I mean, that's the world of influencers, right? Why does influencer marketing work so effectively across social media? It's because these are not parents telling kids what to do. These are young voices, often, sometimes older voices, who have a perceived coolness and a perceived relatedness, who are telling people, this is what you should do. I would love for someone to be a hygiene influencer. Let's move from the hygiene pillar to the next pillar. I'm feeling like the next pillar should be nutrition. How do you feel about that?
I feel fine about that. I think we should, at the outset, say a few things about the topic of nutrition, which to me is the most complicated of all of the 4 pillars of health, because there are lots of different movements out there about how to best communicate to kids and, frankly, adults, how to achieve good nutrition. And some people are like, listen, you just say these are healthy foods and these are not healthy foods, and you have to have lots of healthy foods and not much of the unhealthy foods go, right? There's that camp. And some people believe you should use the word junk food and there's nothing wrong with that. And other people think, no, that's actually not a great phrase to use. So there's a lot of philosophical debate. There are folks who believe in disarming food pairings, which is a fascinating concept. And Zoe Bisbing from My Body Positive Home talks about this, where you put on a plate, carrot sticks and chicken breasts and a lollipop. And it sort of demonizes, I don't even think that's a word, different kinds of foods, so that there are no bad foods and good foods, that there are just lots of different foods and you figure out. And then there's intuitive eating. And so This is not an episode about all of those movements. It's just a comment to say different families are going to do this differently. Different families have different nutritional needs depending on the health and, underlying illnesses or conditions that folks have. Those of us who are adults have our own past and histories related to food and eating. And so that plays into it. And so it's not uncomplicated, but there are fundamental things that growing bodies and grown bodies need to take, like in a nutritional sense, need to be in good health.
Yeah. And maybe, let's just press rewind for a second. So this is not an episode where we're endorsing certain philosophies. We might do that episode actually one day, but we're not doing that today. We want to talk about the pillar that's holding up the roof. So the nutrition pillar that's holding up the roof goes something like this. There are certain nutrients that every human needs to take into their body in order to maintain health and wellness, and if they're growing, to grow. And these nutrients can be categorized in a bunch of different ways. So there are vitamins and minerals, there's protein and carbohydrates and fat. Everyone needs water, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then things like fiber to move. There is a lot of overlap here. There are foods that check 2 or 3 of these boxes. There are foods that check none of these boxes in a healthy way. There's a lot of conversation in our society about processed foods and unprocessed foods. How a food is made absolutely contributes to its nutritional integrity. Okay. Mm-hmm. And we have to be super clear about that. The less processed, generally speaking, the easier it is for the body to extract all the nutrients from that food. The more processed, generally speaking, the harder it is for the body to extract the nutrients, and the more likely the body will get inflamed by the components of that processed food. It's not to say don't eat processed foods, but it helps lay the foundation for an understanding of what a healthy diet looks like. If you need to understand how complicated nutrition is, look no further than the word diet. The word diet actually means what you eat, what you consume, but we've turned it into a verb that means to lose weight. This is a very, very fraught topic. So here are the nutritional basics that as you get into conversation with kids, we recommend that you employ. And frankly, for yourself as well, when you're in conversation with other adults or when you're in conversation with yourself, when you're standing at the refrigerator wondering what you should eat. So the nutritional tenets look like this. Number 1, some people eat 3 meals a day. Many people do not. They eat smaller meals more frequently throughout the day. Some people eat more at one time of day, like morning, midday, others later in the day. The how much at any given time and when of it all cannot be viewed alone without also looking at the what and the quantity. All of those things together impact the way any given food changes your body, fuels your body. That's a sophisticated concept. And as you try to explain it to a tween or even a teen, you can see how this becomes 100 conversations. And sometimes, Vanessa, 100 conversations that adults feel completely ill-equipped to have because it's complicated.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I love to think about when I think about teaching kids how to take care of their bodies as it relates to the food that they put in their bodies, the way they move their bodies, which we'll get to in a second, is helping them with the self-awareness of how different things make them feel. So yes, like stuff is delicious coming in, and then do they have to run to the bathroom 15 minutes later? Do they feel exhausted and like all they want to do is lie on the couch? Are they capable of going and playing a soccer game after having had that meal? Are they up late at night because they don't feel great? Do they skip breakfast because they're not hungry that early in the morning and then they're starving later in the day? And to me, it's all about helping them clock and awareness and help them make decisions about how to shift and change the choices about what they put in their body, how much, and when, so that they are responsible for caring for themselves. And that's really the conversation. And it doesn't sound like, listen, asshole, if you hadn't eaten that bag of crap that I told you not to eat, you would be fine. And it's all your fault. And you're a total idiot. Go to your room. I'm not talking to you for the rest of the day. Right. Even though that's your inner monologue, that's not how the conversation sounds.
That's your inner monologue. I'm looking at the curriculum we created, and I'm looking at actually the nutrition unit that we created, which is this particular unit is designed for fourth graders, just to level set. And the 3 learning objectives of that lesson are exactly what you just described, Vanessa.
At least I'm consistent.
You are so consistent. They are to connect nutrition and exercise, because it's one unit, to energy levels, to connect nutrition and exercise to mood and physical health, and to connect nutrition and exercise with self-confidence. And then we have a note at the bottom of the learning objectives that says, and to appreciate the ways a sedentary lifestyle can negatively affect health. That is as judgment-free as it gets, but it honors the fact that there's a lot to think about when it comes to, we're just talking about nutrition in this pillar, but how nutrition impacts energy, how it impacts mood, how it impacts health, how it impacts confidence. This is a lot of conversations that none of them involve the word asshole or bag of chips.
So before we move to exercise and physical activity, can I just offer up the alternative to hey asshole before we move on? I don't want to leave people hanging with the what not to say. So it could sound something like, hey, I noticed that after we got Five Guys, you had to run up to the bathroom and spend an hour in the bathroom. Do we want to have a conversation about the choice of having Five Guys and how that makes you feel, right? They may say, no, I don't want to talk about it. Or, yeah, I'll talk about it. I know I have to go to the bathroom immediately after, but it's totally worth it. Fine. That's one conversation. And the other conversation is your kid is sitting down to eat a meatball hero and a bag of Doritos and a Coke 20 minutes before a soccer game. And you might say to them, I have no problem with you eating all those things. Those things are super delicious. But I have a feeling that you're not going to feel great when you're playing in a game. What would be a better choice before a game? And then we can talk about when it might be great to eat those things at another point this week.
Or you could say nothing and zip it and let them eat that thing and let them feel the consequence. And when they are turning green in your car, you can help them connect dots without being judgmental. And you can say, I wonder if one of the reasons you don't feel great right now is that you fueled with, X, Y, and Z, fill in the blank. And maybe next time you want to try fueling with something else that might make you feel better. What would that thing be? Let's take note of it right now, and I'll bring it to the next game.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the meatball hero situation is because 2 weeks ago they did the same thing and felt like crap, and you're trying to remind them not to do it again. So it's noticing, it's curiosity, it's not judging them, it's not globalizing their behavior, it's asking them their thoughts, their awarenesses, their realizations. Those are the kinds of nutritional conversations.
And it's because, again, this is a pillar. And you can't hold up this corner of the roof yourself for the rest of their life. As they are getting older, they are making nutritional decisions all day, every day that are independent of you. We need to teach them how to reinforce the pillar on their own so that as they eventually leave our nest and go out and live independent lives, they've got the knowledge and the skills to understand how to energize their bodies properly.
So, Cara, let's now talk about exercise and physical activity. There are some just basic fundamental rules about what human beings need, and they need an hour of exercise and physical activity every single day. Now, I feel like you might say more than that.
Well, I mean, again, I just want to be macro for a second. So we're talking about a pillar of health. The pillar of health is exercise now. Exercise, the goal of exercise is heart health, bone health, muscle health, right? So these are like the big systems in our body that benefit from physical exercise, mental health, which we'll get to, future illness prevention, so immune health. And it all happens when we move our bodies. And what research shows us is that people who don't move their bodies at least 60 minutes a day have lower heart health, lower bone health, lower immune health, and lower mood or lesser mental health. Not always all of those, not always to the same degree, but sedentary lifestyle, which is a lifestyle where you sit or don't move most of the day, usually defined as basically all day except for 60 minutes, right? That's that 60-minute cutoff. Sedentary lifestyle is associated with all those negative things. Therefore, that's where that kind of 60-minute rule comes up. But I do say more, and most people, when you listen to experts who speak about longevity or health and wellness from a sort of physiology and exercise standpoint, they will usually say more too. This is not to say you have to take, 3 workout classes a day, or you have to be, playing a soccer game and then a basketball game and then, doing a dance-a-thon. It's like, no, getting up, walking, going up and down stairs instead of taking an elevator, parking your car extra block or two away and walking an extra block or two to run the errand or go to the doctor's visit. These are all little bits and pieces of exercise that we get all day, every day, and they add up. And so it is cumulative exercise that we're talking about. And you're going to probably ask me next, well, isn't there data that you're supposed to get like a minimum amount? And the answer, I'm just going to jump in and say, yes, most people say 20 minutes of cardio is sort of the bare minimum before you start seeing the benefits of that cardio session. But this is not to say that doing less than 20 minutes doesn't count for anything.
And when talking to kids about exercise, the complication often arises because they feel like it's like playing a sport or going for a run. They have, and frankly, adults can often have a really limited view of what physical activity and exercise is. And it can be any number of things. It can be playing tag outside. It can be walking the dog. It can be dancing to music while you're doing the dishes. Yes, it can be swimming laps or going for a run or playing in a sports game, but it's actually so many other things. And one of the things that I loved when I created Dynamo Girl, and we were, doing sports classes for hundreds and hundreds of girls around New York every year, and I would always get these questions from the parents, which is like, my daughter's not an athlete. And I would say, well, why do you say that? And they'd say, well, we did soccer class when she was 5 and she really didn't like it. And so, we just don't do sports.
It breaks my heart.
Well, yes, there were any number of things I could say, but one of them was, kids really want it to be fun and they want it to be joyful and they want their coaches or the person leading the activity to make them laugh and to play music, and they want it to be social. Like, if you think about your kid's personality and then their relationship to physical activity, it often requires some creativity and flexibility for what kinds of physical activity will suit them.
Oh my God, it's such a good point, because it's not like they're going to work. I feel like sometimes we take exercise and we make it a job, a task, a to-do list, and we do it as we get older. That's really what it becomes. I don't know about you, but I feel great when I exercise. But when I don't exercise, I actually feel, I don't know what the word is, guilty or like I haven't done the thing I'm supposed to do. It's very, we've got to unpack that and throw that away. That is
Totally.
a really worthless set of emotional expenditures.
And it should be about like, what's my personality? What do I like doing? What feels good to my body? What doesn't feel good to my body? But like, I actually need to get a little bit stronger, or a little more flexible, or, kids also really love it when we do stuff with them. So if you have a kid who's resisting physical activity, then get in the pool with them or have a catch with them. Or, I mean, it's so funny because whenever my youngest has to walk the dog, I'm always like, do you want me to come with you? And he's like, no.
I have the same thing. It's like it's you versus my music, and my music will win.
Yeah. I mean,
time.
God knows he's probably like watching TikTok. So physical activity can be any number of things, but some personalities are going to naturally get out there and move their bodies for hours a day, and others need some help.
When you were young, think back to what you loved to do. I am willing to bet the thing you love to do for exercise now is not that thing. Our tastes change, our bodies change, our abilities change, our risk analysis changes, and our tastes change. And so they're allowed to change their minds too. They might be really into one thing, and then they announce that they're not. And sometimes there's something else going on, and you have to dig deeper and make sure there's not, just a dynamic with a kid or a coach or whatever. But sometimes it's because actually their taste changed and they're just not into that thing anymore. And with exercise, again, going back to the kind of big picture, in order to keep this pillar strong, the key is that we teach kids, hey, it's just about moving your body. So whatever works for you. And if this thing is no longer working for you, it's not analog. It's not like do it or don't do it. It's more kind of, okay, what are you going to try instead to replace it? I always say one of the most surprising forms of exercise that I ever learned about in medical school was pillow fighting, because it's highly cardiovascular. And, I jest, but not really. Kids get exercise in lots of different ways. And
yeah,
so
because hopefully they play. And
they play.
I mean,
which has so many benefits.
I hope they play. If their play is all online, then that's a
right.
a shift.
Well, that's the frame, right? It's like there's a moving your body. And frankly, there are a lot of game designers out there who have done a beautiful job of marrying moving your body with gaming. And there's a lot to be said for that. And one of the more fun things that I used to do with my kids when they were younger were dance games where, it just proved I had no memory left and forget the coordination. And it's fun and we laugh, but there's a screen involved, but there's a lot of movement. Vanessa, we have to wrap with the fourth pillar, which is sleep. And we're going to be brief on sleep because we have several episodes that cover sleep in great detail. But we can't talk about the four pillars without acknowledging that sleep is equally important. Every other pillar is stuff that we do actively while we're awake. And sleep is the pillar that requires unconsciousness. It's like, it's the thing that you have to do. That's the thing you don't do anything to do, right?
Right. I mean, the challenge with sleep is the wraparound stuff to sleep. It's not the sleep itself, because hopefully when you're sleeping, you're, not actively doing anything at all, although your brain is really busy doing a ton while you sleep. To get kids to comply with getting to sleep, staying asleep, and depending on their age, sleeping later if possible. You want to talk about the baseline amount of sleep they need. And Kara, you can run through that quickly, but there are certain arguments as to why sleep is so important, and particular ones are very effective in getting kids to comply. And one of those things is that you grow when you're asleep. And literally when you're asleep, there's a hormonal loop that, Kara, you can quickly share that's really, 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 really cool. And I should remind people, we have a whole chapter about sleep in our book. And we've heard from so many people that their teenagers and tweens are reading that chapter in particular. Yeah. So they grow in their sleep.
On the Awkward Bot, you can look it up and just pass along the 200-word description of why sleep is important. It's going to list these four things. So go for it, Vanessa.
So you grow when you sleep. You store memories when you sleep. So
correct.
Cramming for a test and staying up a couple of hours later is actually less effective than going to sleep, letting your brain store the memories that you've had
And toss the ones it doesn't need, right?
Toss the ones it doesn't need. But that's the argument for getting to sleep. The other thing that's important with sleep is mood. It helps stabilize mood. It helps keep mood up. If you're cranky, if you're unpleasant, if you're irritable, think about, or if your kid is, how much sleep are they getting? And the fourth, Cara, is
metabolism. So sleep is directly connected to how you burn through the nutrition of the pillar we discussed earlier, right? If you don't give your body enough sleep, then the hormonal balance between two hormones called leptin and ghrelin, which are really central to the way we burn through our calories, our energy, that balance is a little bit off. And instead of feeling full after a certain amount of food, we feel hungry and hungrier. And then we store the energy that we bring in as fat because the body doesn't trust its human that's not letting it sleep enough. It thinks there's something really wrong going on, and I need to store every bit of energy I can so that I can get to it when I need it in the future, because I know we're in a 4-alarm fire situation with this body because I'm not sleeping, right? And so we get hungry, we store those calories as fat, and this is entirely connected to the amount of sleep. Kids ask us every single time we are in a classroom with them how much sleep they need. And the answer to that, Vanessa, is that sleep needs vary by age and they vary by individual. So what I mean by that is young babies need somewhere between 14 and 16 hours of sleep. By the time they become toddlers, they need somewhere between 12 and 14 hours of sleep. These are in a 24-hour period. By the time they start school, they need somewhere around 10 hours of sleep. And that need continues all the way through the teenage years until adulthood, when they need somewhere between 8 and 10 hours of sleep. However, there is the biggest, boldest asterisk on this advice, which is every person is different. And there are going to be people who need more than the recommended amount. That's just how their body works. And there are going to be people who try as they might, their body will not let them get the recommended amount, and they're fine with a little bit less. The worst thing we can do when we communicate the how-to about sleep hygiene is to say to adults, make sure they get the sleep, because sometimes that can create tremendous anxiety and stress that keeps them up. Needing to fall asleep can be a thing that prevents kids from getting enough sleep. So we've walked through in other episodes and in the book, lots of ways to help wind down for sleep. We have tons of advice about that, basically everywhere that we put out content, and we won't rehash it here. But to remember that to build this pillar nice and strong, sleep is an absolute human necessity, and it is a necessity for people of all ages that shifts and changes as you get older. But all of us have to honor it, and all of us have to figure out ways to get it.
Thanks, Cara.
Good night, Vanessa. I'm going to go to
bed. Me too. Thank you so much for listening. You can email us with questions, feedback, or episode requests at podcast@lessawkward.com.
If you want to learn more about what we do to make this whole stage of life less awkward for everyone involved, our parent membership, our school health ed curriculum, our keynote talks, and more are all at lessawkward.com.
And if you want products that make puberty so much more comfortable, visit myumla.com.